Welcome to Out with Dan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello and welcome back to Out with Dan. Today I'm excited to talk to Lana Harper about Rise and Divine. Lana is a New York Times bestselling author from Payback is a Witch. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This is our second go around and I'm even more excited this time now that we know each other. So yes, celebrations.
Same here. So I have a whole bunch of different directions I'm going to run with you because I know you. So this is your fifth book in the Thistle Grove series. Is that correct?
That's right.
And I will say for the audience, because I know some listeners have this thing about, well, I don't want to read a series. All of your books stand completely on their own. There are hints of what might have happened in previous books, but they're not necessarily a continuation of the same story. Would you agree?
Yes, so they are all intended to be read as standalones, and you can pick up any single one of them at any time. If you prefer that trope or that couple or anything about it. It is, I will say, a little bit easier from what I've heard to read them in chronological order, or maybe not easier so much as more satisfying, because you see the return of characters from the previous seasons, the previous installments, and you see a little bit of discussion of what led up to these events. But I really think, I aimed very intentionally to create stories that are completely self-contained, that you don't have to do that unless you want to, just so that you can enjoy it at any time. I love series like that. I'm a big series reader in general, but I especially enjoy that I don't need to be weighed down by this, impenetrable ton of detail before diving into another book.
So give the audience an overview about what Rise and Divine is about, and then we'll get into the meat of it.
So Rise and Divine is, we're coming back full circle. This is another Avramov family book, and this is well known by now, my favorite Thistle Grove family. They're the necromancers, the diviners, the fortune tellers and speakers to the dead. So they kind of are the most morally gray, ambiguous, chaotic family in Thistle Grove. And even by their standards, Dasha Avramov is kind of an outlier because she is a devil eater, which is very rare. And what that means is she's functionally an exorcist who banishes demons out of whatever, they're haunting or possessing by pulling them out and eating them, which is gross. It's gross. And I'm pretty sure it comes off as gross in the books. And many of my friends have been like, Lana, this is gross. Why would you do this? My answer was, I don't know. I thought it was kind of cool and fun, and I'd like to see that happen. So anyway, that's Dasha. And she's also herself a complicated kind of haunted character. She's had so much loss in her life. She lost both parents, and especially her mom's death, which is more recent, continued to really afflict her. And at some point, she was so distraught and so lost that she developed this overly strong affinity, almost an addiction to this world that lies beyond the veil, which she's able to visit as a devil eater. And as a consequence, she did not treat the people in her life very well. One of them was Ivy Thorne, who is of the Thorne family, green magic, very different vibes. They were together, and Dasha managed to break her heart 2 times. So this is kind of their not just second chance, but third chance romance, because they're thrown together to try to plan for the cavalcade, which is a festival celebrating the founding of the town, where all of the 4 families recreate the spectacles that were like magically enacted for the town's founding. So it's a big tourist and witchy event. And it's a sort of closing of the circle, because I was trying to mimic kind of the energy of the Gauntlet, which was the competition that happened in the first book. So I think I did okay that time. Usually this is my least favorite part because I forget what my books are about.
I would have prompted you, Lana.
I was like, oh, way to go. That was not incomprehensible.
Yeah, it was absolutely perfect. And I think you hit the nail on the head. So,
Thank you.
So I sometimes when I read, I imagine these things. So I'm going to give you a couple of scenarios that I imagine, and you can either say yes or shoot them down. So, sort of towards the beginning of the book, we have a scene with Emily where Dasha does have to end up eating one of the devils. So I was so impressed by what I felt like was sort of an homage to Alzheimer's. Was that something I read into it, or was that something that you did intentionally?
I did not do that intentionally, but that is fascinating. That is such a good interpretation of that I am now angry that I didn't think of this. I No, that was absolutely, and what I love about that is that I created that scene and I specifically wanted this sinister notion of losing memories and yet being almost grateful to this thing that's eating them for you, which is not, the way that most people experience that kind of illness. But the fact that you had a completely different take on it is something that I respect and generally am very envious of. I love when a reader finds something that I didn't even consider. So thank you for that one. I didn't think of it.
Well, go on and own it. Tell everybody else that you intended to do
I will.
it.
I'll tell everyone. I'll credit you.
Thank you. So one of the things and the reason I think it came to me was because I think that I've noticed with family members who've experienced Alzheimer's, they cling on to something in the past, and they allow themselves their current memories to be eaten. And that's one of the things, because that's sort of what happens with this character, with Emily. She's clinging to something in the past. But I love the fact, because since you set this up earlier, yes, it is a little gross how Dasha eats the demon, but it was also very satisfying. So
I'm glad. I meant for it to be, sort of a badass moment.
So I'm gonna give the audience an idea. It's like when you step on a worm or a slug. It's like, ugh, that's disgusting. But yet at the same time, it's sort of like, oh, that's pretty neat. I like that. So Lana's twisted enough. She brought this to us. So
there's a lot of darkness going on up in here. I'm always really impressed by people who want to be friends with me or be my partners. Like, aren't you scared? Aren't you like one day I'll turn on you and all of this will come out? Like, at least I put it somewhere. Generally just on paper.
That's right. Maybe you've exercised it out onto the page and that works. So now I'm going to ask you, in real life, not in book life, but in real life, do you have a sweet tooth?
Yes, terribly, terribly. I love sugar. And the interesting thing though, is I don't like candy. I'm not a huge candy person at all. Almost none of the sort of theater candies or things that you would normally imagine, but like chocolate, cake, pie, like I will just absolutely make myself sick. So that is 100% like that's me. that came from a very honest to God place.
So I find that your writing is very honest. You bring in the reader, and I just had this imagination because I'm like you. I'm much more of a cake and a pie eater rather than just candy. I'd rather have something substantive. However, when it's good, I want more of it. So I was like, yes.
I feel the same way. I mean, it used to be in my author biography. I used to, I'd be like, she's like, what does she subsist on? Like cake and eyeliner. And I wasn't even joking. Like those two things, I'm like, are they going to have cake? And do I have eyeliner in my purse? And these are my biggest concerns. I don't even know what that makes me sound like. Probably terrible.
No, it makes you sound real, at least I think.
Thank you.
So in this character of Dasha, you've given us someone who, for lack of a better term, has an inability to commit. And this is a theme that you've sort of returned to, not as much in this one as in the previous book. But so what about that inspires you as an author?
I think it's a very interesting dynamic to try to explore the different ways that people have an inability to trust other people, even when they want to, especially because there's such a different constellation of characteristics that usually feeds into it. I assume you're talking about Delilah in the previous book, who was also prickly and difficult for a completely different reason and in a completely different way, but both of them end up wanting desperately to make this human connection, but for their specific reasons not being able to. And so part of the character arc is that both the understanding of it's okay and preferable to want to be close to other people and to let them help you, but you have to be the one to let them in. So it's that joint feeling of proactivity. Yes, you can be independent, but one of the ways you can be independent is by recognizing this is what I need. I need other people. And here's how I'm going to alter the way that I interact with the world so that I make it acceptable to myself and respectful to other people to be with me. Because plenty of people sort of will use other people to have their needs met in various different ways, but that doesn't mean that they're fixing the core problem or that they're treating those people with the value and respect that they deserve. And so I'm always interested in this because it's happened to me many times. Kind of, I guess, from both sides. I think mostly I've been in the like, please, why not though? We could, this would be so nice if you would just stop being so difficult. Like, so I find these personalities very complex and very compelling in some ways. And then in other ways, they're just like every other character and all the main characters. Some of those are reflections and pieces of me. And I've recognized in the past that I've been often much too ready to leave something quickly just because and I thought at the time it was empowering. Like, you guys, this isn't great, not working for me. I'm leaving. Goodbye.
Have a great rest of your life.
Exactly. And that's not sometimes, to be clear, that is the answer.
Yes.
I'm not saying often, in fact, it is the answer, and no one should be afraid to linger in a situation that's bad and wrong for them. But sometimes, especially as I get older, you come to this realization of it is never going to be perfect or even close to perfect or even close to easy usually. Like, the best you can hope for is that they'll understand you and that they're going to like you as well as love you. So I think that's what I'm trying to achieve with these characters. Like, yeah, it's not going to be perfect for them. They are getting, at least from what we see, a happily ever after. But that's not to say they're not going to revisit these struggles as they keep moving with each other.
Well, and I think that shows a great spotlight on humanity, because I do agree with you that, some people seem to always have a partner. Mm-hmm. Always. I mean, they get rid of one and the next one moves in the next day or whatever. And I think they shake hands at the door, but I've never been that person. Yeah. I've been on the single spectrum, and I know a great deal of that is my inability to commit, but it's also, I learned very early on, if something doesn't work for me, I focus on something else. And like you say, if someone is toxic or not for me, I'd rather just move on than stay with toxicity. I know some people subsist on toxicity. They love it. They love the fighting, the drama and all that. I say to people, if I want to see drama, I watch television. I don't need drama at home.
I'm the same way. Even though I can be very aggressive, and I think probably because I just have this mean Slavic face, people sort of assume that my default setting is aggression. And it's really not most of the time. It takes a lot to get me to an aggressive perspective. And I experience conflict very personally. It hurts me to be fighting with someone. I don't like hurting their feelings, and I don't like them hurting my feelings. And I hate that kind of rancor in the air. I guess that's the thing. I don't find fighting sexy. And I don't find it emotionally, like, there's nothing about it. And I know that that's not, some people really thrive on it. And sure. In some ways, I'm almost kind of intimidated. Like, I'm not jealous exactly, but I'm like, how do you do that? That's really remarkable that you're able to use this as fuel in a positive way, because I could never.
No, me either. I've often said, if you hurt my feelings, that, I'm a totally different person, because then I become wounded, and I just don't want to be around someone who wounds me. So.
Exactly. What is your zodiac sign?
I'm a Pisces.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, are you Pisces or Cancer?
Yeah. You're a Pisces. What about you?
I'm a Sagittarius, and we're supposed to be impervious to this stuff. Like, we're supposed to be like, okay, well, I guess I'll go find my other partner, and we're going to jet off to Thailand or whatever. And I've never been that kind of Sagittarius. But I have a Capricorn moon sign and an ascendant Aquarius. So there's just a lot of stuff going on here. And apparently it makes me overly sensitive to things, because I really do. I have a hard time letting go of wounds. I don't hold grudges exactly, but it's hard for me to forget that someone hurt me in a real way.
Totally agree. I think we're twins.
Yeah.
To be honest.
Exactly. I think Pisces and Sagittarius in some ways we might be on the the opposite sides. I always forget how this works on like the zodiac
Right.
wheel.
Yeah, I don't remember either. I do know that a running friend of mine, she was Sagittarius, and I just absolutely adore her. So, it. I think sometimes water finds its own way, right?
Yeah, I love water signs. I think there's something about them because they're so fluid and emotional. And fire is the same. I mean,
Yes.
we're very, very movable, mutable signs, and I think there's nothing, that pairing makes sense to me.
I agree with you. I agree with you. So something you wrote, your character Bellissima said something that I thought for once it sort of shifted the way I looked at things, and that was Bellissima said that mortals could change their mind. And I never thought about the fact that, when we read books or watch movies that have gods in them, they have one path. They have a path that they're on. And then all of a sudden, here comes Lana, and she said that we mortals may be better than gods because we can change our minds. So, what about that spoke to you in writing that?
I find gods very interesting to write about. I think I've written about them in almost every book that I've written so far, and I will be writing about them more in the future, hopefully. I think it's very interesting and counterintuitive that these are these, in some ways, all powerful, sometimes omniscient beings that we imbue with, we respect them, we glorify them, we deify them literally. But the whole point of a god is that they're a collection of usually immutable attributes. And immutable attributes typically mean they cannot alter their destiny because their destiny and their path is who they are. It's what they are. It's just they are a living embodiment of a certain, like collection of energies. And I was just thinking, how terrible must that be that you have to continue to be who you are without really changing in any kind of a tangible and substantive way, the way that humans do. And that's just my interpretation. I was thinking of, in some ways, the Greek gods and all of their various flaws and how much they had the same stories over and over and over again, just with different humans playing their parts. Whereas free will is, I think, or I hope, part of humanity and one of our most wonderful. I don't believe in predestination. I do believe that maybe we have a gentle path that we can follow if we want to learn certain things. But I think it is up to us. We can veer off it at any time, come back if we want to, go whichever other way. Like, it is a constant choose your own adventure. And I think there's something about that is more beautiful than being divine.
I agree. I totally agree. And that really spoke to me because I thought, it's like all of advertising, we're told that the gods are better than the mere mortals. But the fact that we have the ability to change lanes or to change direction is something that is really rather beautiful, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I'm so glad that I wanted, in her guise' Maya and just as Belisama, to really showcase exactly that aspect of the relationship between gods and humans. And so it's very flattering and gratifying that you picked up on that. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. So this book has something for everyone. I think, it's got some romance, got a little mystery, it's got a little, witches and gods and mortals and all of that stuff. Do you plot out all of your books or do you write organically?
I do both. I've become more of a plotter than I used to be. I used to absolutely wing everything and it was terrifying. And it meant you're just, there's a blank page. What now? What is going to happen? And I love that in a different way. It just meant much more revising, many more drafts, because, when you're winging things all the time, it's a little bit difficult to create like an intentional plot. Like you can't really do that. I at least can't do that. I also can't plot things out beat by beat. I know some authors have these pages long plot maps and my brain can't. Even writing a long proposal, it hurts me. I don't know what's going to happen to that granular degree. I know what's going to happen on a macro scale, and I have these, I call them the signal fires. Like, there's scenes that I know will happen and they often don't happen the way that I think that they will necessarily, but those kind of standing stones will definitely take place one way or another. So I have about, I would say maybe a page, maybe less than a page, single spaced of here's how this book is approximately going to come out. frequently it goes off the rails and I go in a different direction, but it's comforting. It's like an emotional
Yes.
support plot. That's really what it is. I just like to hold its little hand. I'm like, I know you exist.
Right. Well, I like that. And as we were talking about mortals, you have the ability to change your mind because, and I do know that in speaking to a lot of authors, you'll be writing just a long stream and then all of a sudden someone else sort of knocks on the door and wants to come in to play. And it's like, well, who are you and where did you come from?
Yeah.
But those people come to us to help further the story.
Absolutely.
And if you're open to it, I think it must be a lot of fun.
It is so much fun, and it's in some ways it really is. Even though I can never get over feeling cheesy when I say this, but the books that are the most fun to write, like the Thistle Grove books, have been for me. It does feel like you're an archaeologist, paleontologist, whichever one of the ones who uncovers the fossils.
Right.
So it feels like finding something that existed before you, because the way that it fit together at the end was not something I first saw. I didn't know starting from the beginning where I was going to end up, but I had left myself all these breadcrumbs that came together in a way that I couldn't have anticipated, where I was like, this really works. Like, how did my brain do that? And I still think that the way that at least my brain works with it is like that lucid dreaming, where you just connect images and a lot of it happens beyond your conscious self. Like, you are creating something that is larger, or at least in some ways even separate from you, or separate from the intellectual part of you that's looking at this page and trying to make it make sense.
And I think there again, I've talked to a lot of authors who are right like you do. Some people say that too much of a structure, too much of an outline weighs them down because they want that ability to have someone come in that they didn't anticipate, or it go in a direction they didn't anticipate from the beginning. So I love it. But it does all wrap up nicely, and it is wonderful. I love this book. It was so fun. Again, the book is Rise and Divine, and it's by Lana Harper. Lana, do you have a website or social media you would like to share?
Yes, I am the most active on Instagram. So I'm at Lanalyte, LANALYTE on Instagram. I do also have a website that I'm always behind on. That's lanapopovicbooks.com. So definitely check Instagram before you go wandering over there. And I'm technically on Twitter, but I'm sorry, on X, but don't try Instagram first. It's basically useless to attempt to like knock me down over there.
I love it. I think that all of us have to have a presence somewhere, and I find that Instagram is the one that most people prefer. So
friendly.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you again for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at OutWithDan.com, on Twitter at OutWithDan, and on Instagram and Facebook at Go Out with Dan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.